And you are going to face these kind of things. And the devil makes great use of these things, knowing that he has that power. And the truth came, and the word came, and your bubble got popped to show you that that's all lies. So it took away his power. He had power till you knew what the truth was. All right, so today we are in HaSatan, Did the Devil Make You Do It, part 21. So we're gonna do a couple of quick resets here. Reset number one is vital, okay? Because hopefully a lot of you at this point, 21 parts of this thing, and we're getting close to the end. 21 parts of this thing, I hope you really have a very different understanding of HaSatan, the devil, and their role, and your interaction with, or you're potentially being affected by that, okay? Anybody not changed at all in their understanding? Okay, everybody's been changed. All right, so we start off with the number one thing. Yahweh restricts, constrains, and limits what HaSatan can do. Some of you never understood that. That was like a revelation, okay? You were taught the devil can just do whatever he wants, but he can't, okay? He can't. All right, Yahweh does restrain, constrain, and limit what he can do. All right, there's two terms used in the scriptures, or titles, or names, Satan and devil. All right, Satan means adversary. Devil is a slanderer, accuser, usually attacking another person's reputation. Most often the idea of misrepresenting the truth, okay? A liar, right? Misrepresenting the truth. Okay, neither understanding of that sort of thing, neither one initiates anything. Neither one of them is the root cause. I mean, we're talking about two ways to describe the same thing. Call it the devil, call it Satan, doesn't matter. We're trying to describe the same thing. We're not saying there's two different beings, all right? But the role or the effect, one is the effect of misrepresenting truth, slandering, etc. One is being adversarial, all right? Now, that being said, none of that is the root cause of your problem. If you didn't have it in you, there was nothing to work with, okay? So there's no initiating coming from. That's why we said the devil doesn't make you do it. Certainly the devil didn't put the idea in your head. Because people come to you saying, I got these thoughts and the devil's putting them in. No, the devil's not putting them in your head, okay? It's you. I hate to say that, all right? But it is. Now, if it's you, that gives the devil something to work with. That's kind of the point we wanted to make sure that's in there. That's part of the resets, all right? Then, of course, we know that the devil walks about like a lion seeking prey. What makes you look like prey? Being weak and or distracted makes you prey. All right, we've talked about that a lot. Go back to the other parts for the details. Reset number two, in 1 John 3, verses 8 to 10, we know, in this the children of Elohim and the children of the devil are made manifest. In other words, are easy to see what they are. So those doing righteousness are children of Elohim. Those doing sin are children of the devil. Okay, just keep that outside of a framework. Then reset number three. In the beginning of John, prior to this, John made the point that we can turn this into the same thing as children of light, children of darkness. Okay? How children of Elohim versus children of darkness are expressed by how they love their brother. So he uses that as one example as how you can tell if you're in darkness or in light. Children of Elohim, children of Elohim, children of light. Children of the devil, children of darkness. Okay, so this just same idea, it's just a different way of expressing the same thing. Okay? Then we got our last reset, which is from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood. So what it's saying is that you can get into an adversarial place, okay? You can see that happening in you when you fall for signs and wonders of falsehood. And we talked about that extensively. We just keep remembering that you can be impressed by a lot of stuff and it could be leading you into an adversarial place with him, okay? And that's a real big problem that we can be susceptible to, okay? So I wanna make sure that resets there. Okay, now let's get to today's verses in Hebrews chapter 2. Okay, go to Hebrews chapter 2, all right? Now, we're going to read chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4. I don't know that we'll get that all done today, okay? Now understand, at this point, not every verse is going to have the word devil or Satan in it. Not every verse is going to link directly that way. A lot of what we're going to read is giving us context, or it's going to point out the problem that opens us up to something and then the solution. In Hebrews, we're going to get that. Okay, in Hebrews, we're going to find out what the problem is, or at least this linkage to the devil. Then in chapter 3, we're going to understand the problem, meaning how we end up in the problem. And then in chapter 4, we're going to see the solution, okay? So, but we have to first identify what the problem is. Okay, so start here in chapter 2, and I'm going to read verse 14 as a launching point. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the beginning of the chapter to kind of understand what's going on. So 14 and 15. Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself similarly shared in the same, so that by means of his death, he might destroy him having the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver those who throughout life were held in slavery by fear of death. Okay, so what is it really talking about here? This is what we're going to kind of get to by going back to the beginning of the chapter and then continuing through the other 2 chapters. Is he says here, to destroy him having the power of death. What does that mean? Like, so Satan decides if you die or not? What does the power of death mean? And then it says that Yeshua, basically, who's being described here in the book of Hebrews, can deliver those who throughout life were held in slavery by fear of death. So here's the problem. The issue being addressed here is how the devil uses your fear of death. Okay? This is the problem being addressed here. See, sometimes you can read this stuff and you don't even know that you're missing the point. Okay? The point here is dealing with a fear of death and knowing what causes it or brings it about. And so what we have here is, and we're going to kind of get more detail, we go back to the beginning of the chapter, is that there is one, okay, who has the power. It says he might destroy him having the power of death. So he's saying his death comes from slandering, embracing misrepresented truth, embracing slander. People will slander your creator. They'll slander what your creator has taught you. Don't you hear this all the time? The Torah is bad. The Torah is done away with. All these other things. So this is what leads to death. We'll see exactly how it plays out when we read chapter 3 and to chapter 4, okay? Now, he says, and deliver you, this is the key, Yeshua, because he's the Torah, the life, the light, the truth, etc., delivers you out of the fear of death. It doesn't say you won't die, okay? Paul says, look, it's given unto man to die once, then you have to worry about the second death, all right? But it's the fear of death, and specifically the fear of permanent death. Of course, the church turned it into the fear of death permanently being tortured. Of course, that's not scriptural, but they decided, well, it's not enough for you to be afraid of death. Let's really fear you up a little bit, okay? And that manipulates you, because now we're dealing with signs and wonders and things you're afraid of that are powerful things and all this other stuff. That's all nonsense coming from the devil, by the way. He wants you to be afraid. How many times have I told you that this entire thing, the scriptures, the word of Yah, is about the battle between fear and doubt against trust and belief? Okay? So it's just like saying children of Elohim, children of the devil. Okay? Trust and belief, fear and doubt. Light, darkness. Okay? You're seeing how these things are always in a contrast, okay? They're being looked at and compared and contrasted. All right, now, let's go to verse 1. Because of this, we have to pay more attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away. Okay, so there is, I almost feel like we should just read from the beginning in chapter 1. Because it says because of this, okay? Because of this. All right. Let's do that anyway. I don't know if I'm going to stop anywhere in chapter 1, but let's just read it. Verse 1, Elohim having of old spoken in many portions and many ways to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by the Son, whom he has appointed heir of all, through whom he also through whom also he made the ages, who being the brightness of the esteem and the exact representation of his substance, and sustaining all by the word of his power, having made a cleansing of our sins through himself, sat down at the right hand of the greatness on high, having become so much better than messengers, as he has inherited a more excellent name than them. Now bear in mind that the whole purpose of the book of Hebrews, what is the point of the book of Hebrews? Why is it even being written? Well, let's see. Probably because Jerusalem is under siege, and the temple's about to go bye-bye, and the people are going to freak out, like, what do we do now? Okay, because I mean, all of our understanding of vertical connection was through this land and that temple, which we're about to just go and get wiped out and destroyed. And so what do? This is why we're hearing the case later on in Hebrews about we have a high priest, okay? There is still a ministerial order, according to the order of Melchizedek, it says, right? All right, so this is an encouragement to those who are literally losing their minds, as you might if you were living in the land and Rome has their armies surrounding, okay? We don't know what sieges are like anymore, okay? But if you were the ones on the inside of it, surrounded by the outside, you knew that was it. It was just a matter of time. I mean, you were probably, quote unquote, okay the first couple of months, weeks, whatever, but ultimately, at some point, it was gonna go, there was no winning that. Okay, you were cut off, you were surrounded, it was just, the clock was ticking. Okay, and you're just sitting there watching it fall apart. Now, so he's saying, look, we have heard all these things, and I'm starting to point this towards this Yeshua, okay? For to which of the messengers did he ever say, or in verse 5, you are my son, today I brought you forth, and again I shall be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. We're not going to go into all of those details. I'm just going to read this fairly quickly. And when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all the messengers of Elohim do reverence to him. And the messengers indeed, he says, who is making his messengers spirits and his servants a flame of fire. But to the son, he says, your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever. A scepter of straightness is a scepter of your reign. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Now we're starting to see the whole point. This comparison is being brought in. Okay, between righteousness and lawlessness. Because of this, Elohim, your Elohim has anointed you with oil of gladness more than your companions. Do you notice that he just said righteousness that you loved is linked to gladness? So why would we ever buy into, I'm sorry if this messes with you when you're raised in Christianity with this whole idea that the Torah was awful and it's the problem and it's, you know, here it says that righteousness, and this is talking about quoting Old Testament verses, that righteousness is supposed to bring gladness. And righteousness is obedience and submission to the law. I mean, that's the definition of righteousness. Okay, righteousness is not just some construct of society that we think you did good things. Scripturally, it means you obeyed the Creator. Okay, that's righteousness, all right? You know, I have the verse that, I quoted in the beginning when I was doing the reset number 2, doing righteousness makes us children of Elohim. And in Deuteronomy 6:25, it says, it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all his command. That's kind of your definition, okay? Now, he says, and you, verse 10, and you, master, did found the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They shall perish, but you remain, and they shall all grow old like a garment, and like a mantle you shall fold them up, and they shall be changed. But you are the same, and your years shall not fail. Okay, so again, as things are literally falling apart around these people's ears, they're saying, but yet he doesn't fail. He doesn't change, and it's not falling down and apart around his ears. Okay, we're dealing with this in the fleshly, sort of below the earthly things, right? He says, and to which of the messengers did he ever say, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? Are they not all serving spirits sent out to attend those who are about to inherit deliverance? So again, he's saying there is a deliverer. Deliverance is coming. Have you all been told that there's a deliverer and deliverance is coming? Do you notice that this is being said at a time where the temple gets destroyed in 70? This is being written around 60, whatever, right before that. So Deliverance did not come at that moment. Not physical deliverance. But we find out in chapter 2, deliverance of the fear is coming. And you can have that now. Okay, he provided that. So this is talking about, you guys are going through some traumatic things right now, but you can be delivered from the fear. You can have the peace that goes beyond understanding, that comes from above. Okay? So after he says that, then he says, because of this, everything we just read in chapter 1, we have to pay more attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away. Oh, we've heard some things. This is talking to Hebrews, to Jews. You've heard stuff that should have given you the encouragement and the belief and the strength and know how to handle adverse situations in the world. And he says, so because of this, we have to pay more attention to what we have heard. Because if we're not paying attention to it, giving it appropriate attention, you could drift away. So the problem is, the fear can lead to a drifting away. And you are going to face these kind of things. And the devil makes great use of these things, knowing that he has that power. And the truth came, and the word came, and your bubble got popped to show you that that's all lies. So it took away his power. He had power till you knew what the truth was. Because the power was an illusion, because it's based on false things, false information, false understandings. It was all smoke and mirrors. But you thought it was real. Yeshua came to show you what was real and what is real. Okay? All right. You know, we are supposed to be the children of Israel. It just hit me. I just had to throw that out there. All right. You know, all material must be used. Okay. So he says, for if the word spoken through messengers proved to be firm, anybody find anything in Scripture that what messengers brought didn't happen? So it was proved to be firm, right? He says, in every transgression and disobedience received the right reward. We see that also in Scripture. You see lots of things. He said, I told you if you do this, this is going to happen, okay? We see absolutely that Deuteronomy 28 plays out. If you don't obey, all these cursings will come upon you. And we saw that happen. And it was happening again to them when this is being written. Because they still were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. Okay? He says, every transgression received the right reward. It says, now let me understand, it says transgression and disobedience. So he's starting right out to say, look, there is a thing about being righteous, which is obedience and trust. And there's things where you're just not being obedient, okay? You're having a problem with obedience. You're having a problem with transgression. But he's saying transgression is coming from disobedience. And the reason that every transgression comes from disobedience is because you're always obeying somebody, okay? You are slaves to whom you serve. You're serving somebody. You're serving yourself, somebody that's a family member, a boss or a friend, or whatever, but you're not just doing things without any authority behind it. So you're obeying something. Okay, so it could be, you could say you're slaves to whom you obey. All right? Now, so every transgression and disobedience receives the right reward. How shall we then escape if we neglect to so great a deliverance, which first began to be spoken by the Master and was confirmed to us by those that heard? So now he's saying, you guys, you heard all this. This isn't happening like 5 minutes after Yeshua left and was resurrected. There's been plenty of guys talking and sharing their testimony of their quote unquote, the gospel of their witness, right? They're sharing the witness of their experience with Yeshua. This is also not hundreds of years later. This is happening within, 30 years, 30-something years of Yeshua's death, okay? And he's saying, listen now, he says, how shall we escape if we neglect? Again, I want you to see where the problem is. Disobedience, okay? Transgression, which comes from disobedience, neglecting the point. He says, I came and delivered you from all that nonsense, and you still choose to live that. I already delivered you. How did he deliver you? He gave you the information you need. You were living based on information that was false, and now he's giving you information that is true. And you now know the false, or you should know, that the false doesn't have the power you thought it did. And that's what generated all that fear. Now, so we have to be really careful, okay, because you're not going to escape. How are you going to escape if you're neglecting the deliverance? So what's the deliverance? You were deliverance out of ignorance. You know, I know that people were raised to say, well, I was saved back in this day, year, and that date, and this thing, whatever. But you know what? You were. Not the way you were taught in Christianity, but you were delivered out of certain aspects of ignorance. You were delivered out of certain lies that you thought were truths. And so you can look back and say, oh, I remember when I learned about the Sabbath. And I learned that it wasn't an hour on Sunday. Okay? I remember when I learned that Christmas and Easter don't show up anywhere in the scriptures. And I learned where it came from. And I learned that there's legitimate holy days in Leviticus 23 that we should be keeping. See, that was delivering you out of ignorance. So you were delivered. You were also delivered out of lies. I mean, how often do you have to hear, well, he's the reason for the season? For the season of what? For the season of something that's coming from falsehood and paganism and everything else? What do you mean he's the reason? No, the devil's the reason. Because the devil's the liar. The devil's the one giving false stuff. The devil's the one who wants you to be believing all this. Look at the signs and wonders. Everybody puts lights and everybody's so happy. And everybody's miserable when it's all over as they spent too much money and did all these other things to burden themselves. Everybody's miserable because they have to go meet with people they don't even like. Everybody's miserable because they got to buy gifts for people that they can't stand because everything's all obligated. Now, I'm not saying they're not happy at all. I mean, they celebrate and they might have some enjoyment of that, but it's a mixed mess. But you were delivered, hopefully, out of those lies, okay? He says, which first began to be spoken by the Master and was confirmed to us by those that heard. Now, understand my opinion on do you know the Father and the Son teaching, right? My opinion about the Father and the Son when it says, they first began to be spoken by the Master. I'll take us all the way back into the Old Testament when the Master spoke from the mountain, okay? And then was confirmed to us by those that heard. I don't know, those that heard at the mountain, those that heard in various other places, okay? Elohim also bearing witness, both with signs and wonders, with various miracles and gifts of the set-apart Spirit, distributed according to his own desire. So Elohim also bears witness because of the things that he did that were amazing and miraculous. And you have all of that in your life, okay? For it is not to messengers that he has subjected the world to come, concerning which we speak. But somewhere one has witnessed saying, what is man that you remember him, or the son of man that you look after him? You have made him a little lower than the messengers. You have crowned him with esteem and respect, set him over the works of your hands. You have put all in subjection under his feet. Okay? So you have all of this starting to go on here. Now, give me 1 second. So this is quoting from Psalm 8. So we can go there. Just so we can see where it says. He says somewhere it says. I keep thinking of Tevye. Somewhere it says something about a chicken. Anyway. So in Psalm 8, all right, verse 4 it says, what is man that you remember him, and the son of man that you visit him? Yet you have made him a little less than Elohim. You have crowned him with the esteem and splendor. You have made him rule over the works of your hands. You have put all under his feet. So this is quoting it. So back in Hebrews, okay, for in that he put all in subjection under him. He left none that is not subjected to him. But now we do not yet see all subjected to him. In other words, it's not actually, he gave him that authority, but it's not actually manifested yet. Do you understand that you almost always in history have a king transfer authority to his son without actually yet him ruling the kingdom. But it's made manifest or known, he is the next king. So we know Yeshua is the king. Is he actually ruling at the moment? Not here, okay? Now, but we do see him who was made for a little while lower than the messengers, Yeshua, because of the suffering of death crowned with esteem and respect, that by the favor of Elohim he should taste death for everyone. So now he's kind of giving us more of the details here, right? He should taste death for everyone, for it was fitting for him because of whom all are and through whom all are, because of whom all are and through whom all are, in bringing many sons to esteem, to make the princely leader of their deliverance perfect through sufferings. In other words, it's this idea that we have a challenge thinking, how could God relate to us? We certainly have a hard time relating to him. But he said, I sent Yeshua to interact with you, so you can relate to him and he can relate to you, all right? For both he who sets apart and those who are being set apart are all of one, for which reason he is not ashamed to call them brothers. In other words, if you are congruent with, aligned with, and you've gone and changed your life, transformed your life into one that matches his, then yes, we are one. Okay, so he who is set apart and those who are being set apart, the point is that we would be echad. This is over and over again. John 17, he says, Father, I wish that they were one as you and I are one. Okay? He says it 2 or 3 times in that chapter. All right? Now, so he's not ashamed to call us brothers. And by the way, that's what he says in John. He says, I no longer call you, just whatever. He says, I call you brothers. I call you, you're my friends, you're brothers. Now, saying, I shall announce your name to my brothers in the midst of the congregation. I shall sing praise to you. And again, I shall put my trust in him. And again, see, I and the children whom Elohim gave me. So he's making more quotes. Then we get to verse 14, okay, which is kind of where we started, right? Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself similarly shared in the same. See the connection he made? He first establishes everything about who Yeshua is, the deliverer, and all these other things, and he says, therefore, since the children share in, we shared with him, he shared with us, he said he himself similarly shared in the same, so that by means of his death, he might destroy him having the power of death, that is the devil. So how did he do that? By the means of his death. Well, he was resurrected. So we see that death did not have permanent power. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. It doesn't have permanent power. Now listen. He said, by the means of his death, he might destroy him having the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver those who throughout life were held in slavery by fear. You know what? Well, let me tell you something. One of the number one things that I don't want to say I struggle. I guess it's a struggle. In counseling people, that's a challenge for me. Because I don't always have the words to help people break free of being enslaved to fear. Afraid to try something, afraid to let go of something, there's just fear that they're enslaved to. In all kinds of different aspects of their lives. Not necessarily that they're afraid of everything, although there are a few of those, okay, who just live in fear perpetually. But some of you are great in a lot of areas and have that one thing that just has you enslaved to fear. And so you're afraid to fail, you're afraid to succeed. The first time I heard that idea of fear of success, I was flabbergasted. I was a teenager. I didn't know what in the world that could possibly be. But the more I read about it, the more I could see that it's a real thing. Now, I was always that, go-getter type guy, okay? So I didn't understand. I wanted to succeed. I had no fear of it, etc. I had, whatever. But the thing is, these fears are real for people. But he's supposed to be the key to setting you free from being enslaved to fear. Any fear. But you got to bring in that trust and belief and be delivered out of that fear. All right? Because he's telling you that this is part of the power that the devil has. The devil wants you to be afraid. Okay? So this is why, I'm going to get in so much trouble. Look, this is why the church basically functions as a tool of the devil, because all they do is try to smack you with fear. Okay? I'm not saying they're intending to be a tool of the devil. But one of the main things that they do, and you can hear this, you know what? You don't hear a lot of people screaming at the pulpit about how great heaven is. Not that I think we're going there. Revelation says it's coming here, but that's not the point. Let's assume that they believe that you're going there, and they also believe that you could be going to the other place, which I disagree with both of those, but let's just assume for a second. What do you hear them preaching all the time, though? Fire and brimstone, fear. Fear, fear, and fear, and fear, and fear. That's all. Do they give you any real solution to the fear? No. Do they actually acknowledge that Yeshua was here to deliver you from that? Do not be afraid. He did not give you what? The spirit of fear. What's the opposite of that? What did he give you? A sound mind. Oh, so this fear is an unsound mind. Let this mind be in you. It's a sound mind. Philippians 2:5. Ooh. Some of the people out there are like, why do you always talk about this stuff and the mental stuff? Because it's here. That's what it's talking about. He says, I did not give you a spirit of fear, but I gave you the spirit of a sound mind. By the way, that goes to show you that spirit is not an outside thing that comes into you. I didn't give you a mindset of fear. I gave you a mindset that's healthy, that's sound. Tie into my mind, it's sound. You know what's an unhealthy mind? The devil's got a very unhealthy mind. An unsound mind, just absolutely raging with everything that's wrong. And if you open up a door because you are open to that mindset, he's coming running in. So some of you really do need deliverance, but not in the way Christianity does it. The deliverance has already been provided. What you need to do is receive it. You don't need a ceremony. You don't need to confess in public all the things you did or whatever they make you do, the nonsense that they do in these ministries. And I think they only make things worse. That's my opinion. People say, oh no, I've seen some amazing things done. Yeah, did you go back and see where they were like a month later or a year later? I don't think you did amazing things, okay? Every story I get to hear made things worse. Now bear in mind, you may have gotten a positive response because sometimes you get a positive response just to get the person to stop, okay? I'll tell you a quick story. Years and years ago when I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't keeping anything, I happened to be working at a conference in the big conference center room, like one of those type of deals where people have a lot of booths and they're selling different things. And so it was kind of a new agey kind of deal. I was there working, selling Tony Robbins stuff. So it was really about personal development. But there was a guy in a booth, 5 booths down or something like that, that was selling crystals. And he said, oh, these crystals can do this and can do that and everything else. He said, do you have a headache? And I usually did it those days. I had a lot of muscle tension headaches, so I was always pushing myself too hard. I said, yeah. So he took the thing, put it on my head, and didn't do anything. So he said, did you do anything? I said, no. But after about 5 or 6 different tries and I needed to go do something, I said, oh man, I feel great, just to get him to stop. I think you may see some of that in the deliverance ministries. And people are like, oh my gosh, it's all better now, just leave me alone. Don't make me confess stuff in front of everybody anymore. And he was like, look, it does work, another happy customer. I was like, no, I just wanted to leave you. Because he wasn't gonna stop. Okay? Because he was convinced it would work, and it didn't. All right? Now, so bear in mind what it's talking about here. This battle is about fear and slavery to fear and the acceptance of the deliverer that came to deliver you from that slavery to fear. And the devil's role is to keep you in that slavery to fear. Okay, to keep you enslaved. So keep that in mind as we go into next, as we get further into this, all right? And then 15, right. Okay, now 16. For doubtless he does not take hold of messengers, but he does take hold of the seed of Abraham. So what he's trying to say is, look, he's not just doing this to work with the angels or the messengers. He did this for the seed of Abraham. And who are the Hebrews? The seed of Abraham, okay? So he's trying to connect the people who are receiving this message to the point that Elohim has. Okay, this is all about the seed of Abraham, which we can all become because we've got lots of verses Paul talks about that if you do this and this, then you are the seed of Abraham. Okay? And so keep that in mind. Now, he says, so in every way, he had to be made like his brothers in order to become a compassionate and trustworthy high priest in matters related to Elohim to make atonement for the sins of his people. For in what he had suffered, he himself being tried, he is able to help those who were tried. So remember, a big part of this is describing what the issue is this fear. And certainly they were petrified, with the siege going on. Okay, but on the other hand, he's also making a case for this Yeshua high priest that, hey, we have this person. Okay, this is all being handled. We are going to be okay, ultimately. And there's a bigger picture than worrying about dying in this life. Take away that fear. Some of you actually may have gone through that experience where you were afraid of mortality, you were afraid to die, and now you're not. I've talked to actually a few people that have been diagnosed with X number of months or whatever to live, and they're at peace. They're not afraid to die anymore. That would not have necessarily been the case before they came into, actually until they were delivered, right? Coming into relationship with Yeshua delivered them by helping them understand that there's more and that this is a very limited piece of the picture. In the big scheme of things, this is an incredibly small part of it, but yet it's the most critical because if you don't pass this, you don't get to do anything else. You understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like if you're building something, there may be one little small piece. It's just a small piece, but if you don't have this small piece, nothing's gonna work. But you still need that small piece, okay? You could be making a dish and you're cooking, and this one little ingredient that you put just a little bit in, if you don't put that in, the whole thing doesn't taste right. Even though it's not a major ingredient. So this is super critical, but in the big scheme of things, this is just a little blip. And he's helping give them and us perspective. I mean, that's a big, big piece of this puzzle here. He's like, these people are freaking out. I need to give them perspective, okay? Now, nobody really, I don't think enough people teach Hebrews by starting off saying the perspective of who's writing it, what their perspective is, and what they're trying to convey to the perspective of the audience that they're writing to. Context is everything, okay? I mean, I don't know that you can imagine, what it must have been like to have this happening knowing you're not gonna win. It's over, okay? Almost easier when Babylon came in and just took over because it happened all at once. They were under siege. This doesn't happen quickly. It's a slow death. It's a torturous death, okay? Now, you almost can think of it like you could have a heart attack and die, or you could have a cancer that eats you alive for years. I'd rather have the heart attack, okay? All things being considered, No. But they didn't have a choice in this, neither do we. You get what you get. But he's saying, look, we have, again, the audience is freaking out. He says, but we have a high priest that understands, can have compassion. You're suffering, he suffered. I mean, we can't make an argument that how could he know? Well, he was arrested and scourged and all the other things that happened. He knows. He also lived in a world run by Rome. Same Rome was about to destroy everything. So he knew, he experienced, all right? But look, it says, for what he suffered, he himself being tried, he is able to help those who are tried. In other words, saying he has the ability to help you. That's, what a blessing. Not just that he, obviously can do it and does it, but that we can be aware of it, that we can count on it. Because what does that take away? Fear. Okay? This is something that if you're a good parent and you're with your little child and the child is a little nervous or freaking out about something, what do you normally say to a child? I got you. Every parent has done that. And you know what? After about a few times saying it and holding them and making sure that they know, they usually go, whew, and they let go. Because they realize you got them. You have them. This is the writer of Hebrews saying, he's got you. All right? This is Yah through the writer saying, I've got you. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. Maybe not immediately in whatever's happening here, but ultimately. We have a hard time in our finite thinking, our finite life, thinking of ultimately. Okay, because ultimately to us is, 80 to 100 years. That's ultimately. Well, in the, time frame of the universe, that's not a lot of time. Okay? That's a blip. That's a little blip. So now take this and we're going to go to chapter 3. He says, therefore, and because of all of this that we just read, set apart brothers, partakers of the heavenly calling, closely consider the emissary and high priest of our confession, Messiah Yeshua. So saying all that, I want you to really closely consider our high priest and his role, okay? Who was trustworthy to him who appointed him, as also Moshe and all his house. So it's about, because they were always honoring Moshe as being so trustworthy. So Yeshua's trustworthy to him who sent him. For this one has been deemed worthy of more esteem than Moshe, as much as he who built the house enjoys more respect than the house. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all is Elohim. So we're having reality check. I love that the author's saying, let's just set the picture right here, okay? Elohim is everything. But he works with, has sent different ways to get us the information to let us know our relationship to him. Moshe indeed was trustworthy in all his house as a servant for a witness of what would be spoken later. But Messiah, as a son over his own house, whose house we are if we hold fast the boldness and the boasting of the expectation firm to the end. So he's saying, look, I'm trying to get you guys to shift this incredibly high awe and reverence appropriately to Moshe to an even higher level to Yeshua. Therefore, as the set-apart Spirit says, today if you hear his voice, and do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Okay, now we got another quote. All right, so we're going to read verses 7 through 12 here. This is quoting from Psalm 95. He says, continuing here, he says, therefore I was grieved with that generation, said, they always go astray in their heart. This is a key theme that connects us to what was going on with being slaves to fear of death. They always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. They've not had a relationship with my ways. As I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And look, this quote here in the ISR is wrong. It's they shall not if they shall, okay? I swore in my wrath, they're not entering my rest. So this is quoting back to Moses, the rebellion, them not ending up going into the land, them dying in the wilderness, okay? All right, so reword that. He says, look out, brothers, lest there be in any of you a wicked heart of unbelief and falling away from the living Elohim. So now we're going to see the problem is disobedience, rebellion, and unbelief. Okay, so chapter 3, I've designated that this is going to describe the problem. This is why we're slaves to sin. This is why we're slaves to fear of death, because we have not known, okay, when it says there, where is the verse I'm saying? Oh, in verse 10, he said, they have not known my ways. Let me ask you something. When you first heard about holy days, Shabbat, something you really never did before, whichever ones of those you didn't do, did you really know Shabbat when you first heard about it? It took a while of doing it to know it, right? When I say know it, I don't mean like know what to do, how to do it, but to know why it's there, to know its value, to know what it does for you, to know its purpose, To know my ways is what he's saying here, all right? He said, but they go astray in their heart. So if you knew his ways, you wouldn't go astray in your heart. Because you don't understand how his ways are for you. You'd embrace them. In the way, that's what makes David in his psalm writing so amazingly beautiful, is that he says only things about how much I love your law. I love your way. Teach me your ways, O Yah. Okay? I mean, it's just, wow, But yet here he says, you guys are going astray in your heart. You may need to go listen to the heart of the matter and understand where the problem is. I'm sure I read this verse in that teaching, okay? Now, he says, look, brothers, verse 12 again, lest there be in any of you a wicked heart of unbelief and falling away from the living Elohim. So all of this has to do with death is connected to the thing you should actually be concerned with, falling away from, which comes from the heart going astray, which comes from unbelief. So let's kind of piece these little things together. He says, let's just finish with verse 12 there. Hold that spot and let's go to Psalm 95, okay? Psalm 95. And we're going to read here in verse 7, all right? Actually, you know what? Let's start at the beginning. Come, let us sing to Yahweh. Let us raise a shout to the rock of our deliverance. See the theme, how it plays in? There's a reason why the writer of Hebrews quoted this. It has a thematic connection there. Let us come before his face with thanksgiving. Let us raise a shout to him in a song. For Yahweh is a great El and a great sovereign above all mighty ones, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The mountain peaks are also his. His is the sea, and he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down and bend low. Let us kneel before Yahweh, our maker. Now we get to the thing that was being quoted. For he is our Elohim, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice, okay? I think what he's trying to say, let's reverse that verse a little bit. Today, if you would hear his verse, we would be his people of his pasture and the sheep of his hands. My sheep know my voice. That was in Do You Know the Father and the Son, okay? My sheep know my voice. He says, now follow this, do not harden your hearts as in Meribah and as in the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers tried me and have provoked me, though they saw my work. For 40 years I was grieved with that generation and said, they are a people who go astray in their hearts and they do not know my ways. This is the quote, isn't it? And I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. That's what the Hebrew actually says, okay? They shall not enter my rest. All right? Because it doesn't make sense otherwise. I said in my wrath, well, if they enter my wrath, I don't know what that means. In my wrath, why would I say that? What did he actually say in his wrath? You guys don't get to go in. That's a right quote. We know that's what happened. Because we also know what happened at Meribah. We know what that's talking about. Okay, so that's Exodus 17. Let's go there. All right, and we're going to get there soon in the Torah portions. All right, Exodus 17. Now, in verse 1, all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of Yahweh, and camped in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people strove with Moshe and said, give us water to drink. And Moshe said to them, why do you strive with me? Why do you try Yahweh? So again, we're starting to see the writers being direct, subtle at the same time, making them go back to say, what was the issue back here? Well, he quotes the Psalm, which is quoting Exodus. And so what was going on here? They said to Moses, give us water. And Moses said, why do you bother with me? Why are you striving with me? Why do you try and test him? He put you here. He led you here. Why are you not trusting him? See, a lot of you have that problem. You believe he led you somewhere, and then it doesn't go well, at least short term. And so you whine and complain, and then you gripe, and you go and you blame, and you point the finger, and you play the victim, and all this other stuff. And you go to the wrong person, and you do whatever you're doing, and this is the same thing as what Moses is saying here. Why are you doing this to Yah? Why are you not trying him? Why are you testing him? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moshe. Again, if Yahweh put you under me, under somebody, and you don't like something that's happening under that, you'll grumble against me instead of grumbling against the fact that he put you under me, or whoever it is. He sent you to that teacher. He sent you to that place. Most of you, he moved you here. But then you'll grumble about me. I didn't bring you here. I didn't pop your bubble. I didn't put that impression in your heart. I didn't do anything to you. Yes, you did. You were too harsh, and you didn't talk nice, and you were disrespectful, and you were... But you know, the one who sent you here had a reason to... Wait, can we all understand something? And I said this to somebody the other day. I can't remember when I said it. It was a while ago, not too long ago, but a while ago. I said, do you not understand that he knows everything about me? He knows how I talk. He knows what I say. He knows my attitude. He knows my shortcomings. He knows my failings. And yet he sent you here knowing I was all that. Okay? So is he surprised that you're going through any of these things? Now, I'm not saying that to defend any of it. I called them shortcomings and failings. I didn't say that they're my quirks, too bad on you. But he knew he sent you here knowing I was that way. Well, whoever the teacher is. I mean, I'm just using me as the example here. They knew Moses was what Moses was. Remember, Moses had a temper. So I'm sure we don't get to read about all of interactions, but he was ready to throttle some of these guys, okay? And I'm sure he got pretty direct with some of them at times. And often they wondered if it was him or Yah saying it. Well, Yahweh said, blah, blah, and like, yeah, is that him or you? Because we know you're mad. You're pissed off, okay? And so, he says, look, let's understand as we're looking at this. He says, why are you trying Yahweh? So they're hungry. In this case, they're thirsty. So listen to what the people say. And the people thirsted for water. They grumbled against Moses, saying, why did you bring us out into Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Why did you bring me to Cleveland, Tennessee to blah, 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 blah? Look, this room would not fit the people if everybody was here that should be here. Meaning they were here at some point, okay? But they let something get under their skin. But they forget who sent them, okay? Now again, you could discount it and say, well, no, it's just another one of those things like all the other churches I left. Oh, you mean the ones that you were the problem and you left all these places. And you brought you with you every time. I don't know what it is. I just keep having a problem every place I go. Yes, I keep having a problem. See, use the word right there. Listen to what you're saying. Okay? So he says, why did you bring us out of Mitzrayim to kill us in the... Come on. Seriously? Can you not look at the effort being put in by the leader on behalf of the way he believes about the Creator? That the purpose was not to kill you and destroy the children and the livestock and all that kind of stuff. So Moses cries out to Yahweh saying, what am I to do with this people? Yet a little and they shall stone me. Now notice he did not initially go, why won't you give them water? He's like, I know what you're doing. I mean, I don't know all the details. I know that this is testing and proving and pushing them to see what their trust levels are. Will they hold on, or are they going to have this going astray in their heart and disobedience and rebellion and unbelief and all this other stuff? That was being talked about in the book of Hebrews too. Because Hebrews is using the people that it was written to who would know all this stuff. They would know what happened in Exodus. They would know how the psalmist quoted it, okay? So listen, he says, what am I going to do with these people? Do you think he was a little fed up, a little frustrated? And Yahweh said to him, and I bet you know what, you can figure out what Moshe wanted to do with these people. Because you would too. And all of you get that way with somebody in your life, that you do everything you can for them and you provide them, but say, things are not perfect for a minute and it hasn't really gotten the result yet. Some of you wives need to do a better job of supporting your husband who is actually trying to make some changes, but he hasn't gotten there yet. Or husbands, maybe with your wives who are working on something that haven't gotten there yet. Well, at least appreciate that there's progress being made instead of just saying, well, it hasn't gotten all the way there yet, so I'm just gonna just not count it. Okay, this people who are legitimately thirsty are no longer in Egypt. They're no longer making bricks without straw, etc. Of course, they made them with straw. They had to get their own straw. Okay, so are they appreciating that Moses, now this is important, Moses was being used to bring them that far. I wonder how much people that have left appreciate how much I was used to bring them as far as they were. Do they actually appreciate that? No, they want to just throw rocks and all kinds of whatever they want to do. But I was the one that you heard. I was the voice using the words, speaking the words that were his words that changed your life. I'm not claiming I changed your life. Neither is Moses claiming anything here. But they're disrespecting because they're attacking Moses. You brought us out here to kill us. That's incredibly disrespectful. Says, I didn't do anything, Moses. Like, I didn't bring you out here. I didn't destroy Egypt. I didn't bring you out. I didn't part the sea. I didn't bring you to Sinai. Well, they're not there yet. They're about to get there, okay, here in chapter 17. But I didn't do any of those things. All right, so they have, they just had the miracle of the manna. But you don't trust. This is where he gives you and he gives you, provides you up to a certain point, but see, then you want more. And it's not perfect yet, and you still have issues, and you still want more. And I'm okay, so you gave us the manna, but I'm still thirsty. Okay, relax. You don't think he knows that? Whatever you're going through, why do you act like he doesn't know? Well, if he knew, why would he let me go through all this? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in Scripture that he knows and he lets it go on. His reasons are his reasons. He doesn't have to share them all with you. He shares a lot of them, though. Okay? So Yah says to Moshe, he says, these people, they're going to stone me. All right? I work for you. They're going to kill me. Yahweh said to Moshe, pass over before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel and take in your hand your rod in which you smote the river and go. See, I am standing before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall smite the rock and water shall come out of it and the people shall drink. And Moses did so before the eyes of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah because of the strife of the children of Israel and because they tested or tried Yahweh, saying, is Yahweh in our midst or not? See, that's where that quote comes from. That's what was happening in the Psalm. That's what was happening in Hebrews. So the problem, let's get back to Hebrews. Hebrews 3. And we were just quoting this finishing in verse 12. Okay? Look out, brothers, lest there be in any of you a wicked heart of unbelief and falling away from the living Elohim. That is what was happening little by little with these people. Their unbelief was causing them to start to fall away. By the way, do you notice that one of the key symptoms of falling away is blaming the leader? Do you see how that happens? Attacking the leader? That's part of the falling away. Even Judas, he was starting to fall away, so he attacked Yeshua. Okay? Attacking the leader is a sign of you may have a belief problem. Okay? Now, when I say attacking the leader, I'm not just saying any random leader anywhere. I mean that you actually felt like Yah put you somewhere under that leadership. That anointed person, which, by the way, nowhere in Ephesians 4:11 does it say that person doesn't have flaws, that person is not perfect. It doesn't say that there's an expectation for that person to be perfect. He says those people are there to help you become perfect. Okay? Doesn't say they are. Matter of fact, some of their flaws are part of your growth. Okay? Well, I think that you're a good teacher, but boy, can you just tone it down a little bit or maybe talk this way? I'm me. He chose this instrument. If you for a second think that listening to John sounded like listening to Peter or listening to Paul, or any of them sounded even remotely similar, I don't know what you're reading. Okay? Some of them may have listened to the one saying, I wish you were stronger. Some of the other ones are like, hey, can we ease up a little bit? They're just different instruments. Okay, but they're all being used to build you into the structure that you're supposed to be. All right? So here again, verse 13, he says, but encourage one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceivableness of sin. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end. While it is said today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. For who having heard rebelled? Was it not all who came out of Mitzrayim led by Moshe? And with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter into his rest? See, here he even says that that's what the word actually means. Okay? But to those who did not obey. So we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. Let's go back to verse 13. Encourage one another while it is called today. In other words, while there's still time. While there's now. Encourage each other now. He says, because today if you hear his voice and don't harden your hearts, as in the rebellion. And what was the rebellion? The rebellion was not a coup in a physical sense. They were rejecting the authority. That was rebellion. Okay? He says that disobedience and whining, complaining, and finger pointing is rebellion. Okay? There's another place where it says grumbling and murmuring is rebellion. I don't have the verse at the top of my head there, but you guys know the verse. And so weren't they doing that actually? Grumbling and murmuring? That's rebellion. Because some of you are like, well, for who having heard rebelled? The ones whose hearts were wrong, the ones whose hearts went astray, the ones who were slaves to fear. But today, if you would hear his voice, not harden your hearts, he says, but if you would cling and hold fast the beginning of our trust, because you started off with some trust, but are you clinging? We have that teaching, right? Cling, cleave, hold fast. Are you holding on? And while it said today, if you would hear his voice, because he was grieved with those who didn't trust, who through their unbelief rebelled. So this is the problem, okay? We understand that he says, so that by means of his death he might destroy him having the power of death, that is the devil. That was chapter 2. And deliver those who throughout life were held in slavery to fear of death. So that's what we're dealing with. So what's the problem that causes all that? Why did we even need to be delivered? Now we're reading about it here in chapter 3. And then next time when we get to chapter 4, we'll look at the solution, okay? So the conclusion here for today is that we were being held in slavery by fear of death because of unbelief. Did I connect those dots properly for you? Can you see how that actually is what it's saying? As the chapter literally finishes with, that they were not entering. He says, so we see that they were unable. Do you notice that it's unable versus they were stopped? They were unable to enter because of unbelief. Okay? I've had to have some pretty blunt conversations of late where I had to say to people, I said, look, your problem is you're unable to do this because you just won't let go of this other stuff. You refuse to trust or believe. You refuse to you're clinging and holding the wrong things, clinging onto and holding onto the wrong things. So when they say things to me like, well, I can't do that. I say, absolutely, you're correct. They're like, really? I say, no, as long as you believe that, you can't. I think you can, but you think you can't, so therefore you're right. You're always going to prove yourself right because you'll make sure it plays out that way. Well, I can't do it. Why not? Because I can't. And you might give me reasons and excuses and all these other things that you're using as reasons. They're really excuses. But they're justifications in your head for something you already believe. It's amazing how much we fight for what we actually believe. So you may wonder, if you're not fighting for some of these things that he says here, you might not really believe it as much as you thought you did. Because we fight strongly to defend what we do believe. Don't we? That includes stupid, wrong things. Like your belief that you're not capable of something. I've had people say, well, I'm just not smart. Well, who told you that? Okay? I had a long conversation with somebody to help define the difference between smart and wisdom. A lot of you guys are smart enough, let me say. Whatever it means to be smart enough, it's your wisdom that's a problem, which is you don't know what to do with the information. You understand the information. But making good choices with the information and applying the information, that's wisdom. And what does he say about wisdom? He says, ask for it. See, but some of you are like, I'm just not smart. Well, why do you say that? Because I make bad decisions. Well, that's wisdom, not smart. Okay? I'm just letting you know. Intellect versus wisdom is totally two different things. There's some very intellectually sharp people out there that have very little wisdom. We used to say growing up that person was book smart versus, you guys all said the same thing, street smart. What was street smart? Wisdom. Book smart? Intellect. That's all we were saying, using our own slang, for it, the vernacular for it. We said, well, that person's real book smart, but boy, they just are not, okay? Okay, they are not going to survive out there because they don't have the wisdom to do what they're supposed to do with the information. They understood the information fine. You think they're book smart. So some of you are not giving yourself credit for being as smart as you really are. You just make bad decisions and poor decisions on how you utilize it. That's a wisdom problem, okay? That's a wisdom problem. So I'm glad I had that counseling session this week because it gave me a chance to share that with you. Because it took me a minute to figure out, how to unravel what the person was struggling with and to find the words to kind of separate the two. Well, I don't know if I'm smart, or I just don't always feel smart. Do you understand the stuff? You don't think you do when you don't apply it well, but you actually do understand it. There's nothing about Shabbat that you don't understand, but you don't always have wisdom in how you do Shabbat or how you do Torah things that you do. That's a wisdom problem. Okay? It doesn't take smarts anywhere in here. Okay? Nowhere does it say anything about needing to be smart. He gives us all the ability to have enough intellect to handle all of this. What we lack, he says, is wisdom. Okay? He says, anyone lacks wisdom, ask. All right, so that's going to close it up for today. We will continue with chapter 4 next time. Let's go before the Father. Yeah, clap. All right, Father, we come before you, and Father, we're really starting to see even more and understand more about the misrepresenting of truth that the devil does that keeps us enslaved to the fear of death, that keeps us in unbelief, that encourages us to be in unbelief, so that in that state of unbelief we rebel, we don't obey and submit to your voice, we don't trust you. And that's really what it comes down to, which is why I guess, Father, I really appreciate the teaching you inspired me to do called, do you trust him enough to obey him? Okay, because obedience has got to come from trust. So Father, we thank you for everything we're reading here to understand Yeshua's relationship to us, his role as high priest, which we barely got into, but still understanding that part of it is to be our deliverer, but to deliver us specifically from fear of slavery to death, fear of death, because that had enslaved us, okay? So Father, we thank you. We ask your continued patience with us as we grow. May we not be disappointing in your sight. May we not grieve you as you look down upon us. May we do things that merit your favor. As we come before you and ask all these things in the name above all names, Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen. 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 Okay.